So I took her advice and I turned in my resignation, and first I applied and got a job at the hospital, and I went to work. I was supposed to have an interview with a gentleman who worked in the emergency department. So I was going to interview to become an emergency room nurse, which I thought sounded really cool. But when I got there for the interview, that gentleman was sick that day. So they said, I'm sorry, the ER director is not here today, but we have a cardiac director if you'd like to meet with him and see if they'd like to hire you into the cardiac department. So right there on the spot, right during the interview, I had to decide, do I want to do cardiac or do I want to come back another day for ER? I said, let's try this. I would love to interview with the cardiac director. Yeah. And he sat down in front of me, very nice gentleman, and he interviewed me and said, what do you know about cardiac and so forth and so on. I talked about my degree, my experience, my passion for nursing. And he said, what is it that you'd like to do here? And for whatever reason, I can't tell you why this is, Lucas, but for whatever reason, I got a little bit cocky in the interview. And I said, you know what I want to do? I want your job, man.
Really?
I said, I want your job. I want to be running this department. And he kind of looked back and he kind of gave me a nod. He said, okay, well, you got spirit. Let's bring him on.
Okay.
And so then a couple weeks into that job, he resigned and he went to work in home health, and they brought in another director. And she was wonderful, and she became a great mentor of mine. And I worked under her. Her name is Rowena. And I worked under her for a couple of years, and I offered to do everything I could. Mm-hmm. I offered to teach classes. I offered to work days, work nights. I was kind of like a yes man. Mm-hmm. I would just do whatever they wanted. And I learned a lot about nursing, and I became like her right-hand person. And one day I said to Rowena, Rowena, I would really like to do more. I would like to do more than I'm doing right now, and I don't even know what that is. What do you recommend? And she said, well, how would you like to manage this department? I said, actually, I would. And so I applied for a management position there, and I got it, and I came in to work a few weeks later in business clothes, because the managers in those days didn't necessarily wear scrubs, at least in that particular hospital. We wore business clothes. Yeah. So I came to work in business clothes, and she introduced me as a manager. I was still very young, probably 29 or 30 years old, and all these nurses around me that had 20, 30, 40 years experience, many of them much older than me, they looked at me and they said, this is our new boss, this kid, And that was a turning point in my management, well, the beginning of my management career, but also the turning point for me in my management career, because I had to make a choice in that moment. Yeah. Am I going to let this situation sort of bulldoze me over and push me out the door, or am I going to stand up and really sort of let that lion out in me and be a gentle person, but also be a strong person? Yeah. So in those first few moments, a very strong-willed and older nurse stood up at me and pointed her finger, almost touching me in the chest, and she said, like, I'm going to let a kid like you manage me. What is it that you think you can do for me, kid? She was kind of really being real derogatory like that. And I just kind of cocked my shoulders back, and I stood tall, and I said, there ain't nothing I can teach you. And she kind of surprised her, and she said, right. And I said, I'm not here to teach you anything. I said, in fact, if anything, I'm here to learn from you. I said, what I'm here to do, though, is to help resource you, to give you everything you need, to sign your paychecks, to write your schedule, to bring you training, all the things that you'll need to be successful in your job. That's what I'm going to be here for, but not to tell you how to do your job. Yeah. She really liked that answer, and she became quite close to me after that.
Well, that's such like a mature professional answer to say to somebody.
It just came off the cuff.
Like kill them with kindness.
Exactly.
That's an expression for a reason.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So you were never like on like med surge telemetry.
So I was.
Oh, you were.
So to back up a little bit, before Rowena gave me the management job, I worked on the telemetry floor for 3 years.
Oh, okay.
I did a year and a half of nights, a year and a half of days. I did med surge telemetry, and I also learned how to float to like ICU and ER and things like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I got my 3 years experience in.
Nice.
And then when I got the management position, I managed a telemetry floor. Okay. And then I actually got along quite well with the staff, with administrators, with patients, with doctors, with everybody. And when they sent out the surveys, the patient satisfaction surveys, as well as the nurse or staff satisfaction surveys, they called me into the office after they got the results from that back. The administrators did, because they said, we've gotten the highest scores we've ever seen in this hospital. While you're here in your departments. We've never seen patient satisfaction scores that high. We've never seen nurses satisfaction scores that high. What is your secret? And I was really honored that I got those high scores, but I said to them, it's not really any secret at all. I said, happy nurses make happy patients. And I said, I treat my nurses with love and respect. I bend over backwards for them, and I help them out as much as I can, and they love that. And then they happily go and take care of the patients, which makes the patients happier.
That makes sense.
I think it does.
That makes sense, yeah.
I had seen in my life and in my career so many terrible managers,
Really?
so many terrible bosses. And I have experienced firsthand some bosses that were so terrible that it almost made me want to leave the profession altogether.
Whoa.
So I swore to myself at a very young age, if I ever become a boss, if I ever become a manager, I am going to be what the other people need. I'm going to be what I needed, and I'm going to give that gift to them.
Yeah.
Even though it's harder, because it is.
What's it like being, like, when you were managing the cardiac floor over there and eventually other departments later in your life? What is it like being a manager of, because at one point, like here, you had like 200 nurses?
200, yeah, roughly.
Yeah, that's like, I remember
not at all the largest position I've had, but yeah.
Oh, that wasn't the
No,
largest?
no.
What's the largest position?
Well, if I'll just take you through a quick progression. So,
Yeah.
so from managing in Redding, California, I had about 90 employees.
Okay.
And then from there, I I was recruited to become a senior director, which is called a service line director for Kaiser Permanente in the Bay Area. Now, that's the largest position I ever had. I had 450 employees.
Whoa.
And I managed a majority of an inpatient hospital for Kaiser Permanente. From there, I went to work for a jail medical company, and that was as a manager, and then was promoted to manage several jails as far as the medical programs go in the jails. And that's called a regional director. And from there, I was promoted to being a regional vice president. I had facilities in 4 states. I managed about $80 to $100 million in revenue, and I had about, if I had to guess, at least 500 employees that were all under my purview. But I had about 8 or 9 actual directors or managers that were under me.
So, like, run me through a typical week. Like, are you just phone call after phone call after phone call? Like, what even happens when you have that many people under you?
So in the direct hospitals where I've managed, when you physically go to the hospital every day, that job is much more controlled because you're in the one location every day. So your patients are all there, your staff are all there, your computer and your office and your emails are all there. And except for being on call 24/7, you can pretty much handle all the fires in that building because that's where you are as a hospital manager. But when you are a regional manager over multiple sites, they call it multi-site management, and you have to travel, drive, or fly sometimes 10 hours, 12 hours, sometimes it takes 20 hours to get to the location where you need to get to between driving and flying. You can't always be there to put the fires out.
Yeah.
So the people that work under you in management, you have to raise them up to such a level that they are strong enough to handle fires on their own and just to reach out to you when necessary. But sometimes you still have to go. The hardest part for me in those positions was when a manager under me either resigned or quit or was asked to leave for whatever reason. Drug, what's it called? Stealing drugs or whatever.
Oh,
Drug
really?
divertment. That's
That
what it's
happens?
called. It does happen.
From
Medication.
managers?
It does happen sometimes,
Really?
unfortunately.
Gnarly.
So if any time that had to happen, I had to fly out or drive out immediately and take over the site completely
Okay.
until I hired a new manager to come in. That would have been the hardest part about the regional management is when the places I managed suddenly were without a manager and I had to go be that while also simultaneously managing and resourcing all the other
Yeah.
places. That's high stress and that's a lot of work.
Okay.
A lot of traveling, a lot of work, a lot of stress. However, at that time in my life, I really wanted to keep rising up the career ladder, and that was the way to do it.
Yeah.
I eventually got to a certain point when I was the vice president for a company. I was at a certain level where I thought, I think I'm good. I don't think I need to feel like I really need to go any higher.
Yeah.
I never had a dream or a desire really to be a CEO or a president.
Yeah.
Even though I am currently now the CEO and president of my own coaching company, which feels really good.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I don't need to be at the top. I
Yeah.
feel like I'd rather be down the ladder a little bit lower where I can affect more change and be a resource to more people on a close, personal, and intimate level. So after this position, I decided to take a job in hospice. And I worked as an executive director in Redding, California for a hospice company. I had a tiny little staff, like 20 people. It was very quaint, very intimate, very wonderful, and I really enjoyed that. And I did hospice for about 4 years before I went back into the hospital world. I actually missed the hospital world.
Yeah.
Being in hospice, it's outpatient, so
Yeah.
my staff are all going into the homes and whatnot, which is really, really great. Also in hospice, you're around a lot of death. Our patients pass away. They're on hospice. They usually pass away. I do have a lot to say about hospice. I don't want to take up too much time on this podcast, but hospice is a wonderful thing. I want to give it a little plug. A lot of people in the community think that hospice is something for the patient when they're about to die, when they're like 2 or 3 days away from dying, but that's not what hospice is about at all. Hospice is about having a service that can provide a physician for you, nursing, medications, supplies, whatever you need for months and months and months before you die. Many of our patients were on service for 6 months to a year. So I just want to put that out there in the community that when you have a loved one that has a terminal condition, please look into hospice as soon as possible. Please don't wait till the last minute because there's a lot of services available to you.
Okay.
And then from there, because I missed the hospital world so much, that's when I came back to work here in a hospital right here in San Luis Obispo, which is where I met you.
Yeah.
And I got to have a staff, about 180, 190 staff. Had a wonderful manager that worked under me, as well as about eight or so assistant managers, and I had a variety of staff, nurses, in both inpatient, outpatient, CNAs, HUCs, hospital unit coordinators, people who run the telemetry monitoring machines.
Yeah.
Really, really wonderful. I have a lot of fond memories of that. But just to skip ahead to currently, after about a year or so of doing that, I was what became available to me and what was offered to me was a position working in a clinic.
Yeah.
And so for me, after about 32 or going on about 33 years now in the medical profession, it's hard to believe, but I've been in it for about 33 years now. I really decided that as much as I like hospitals, I don't want the busyness and the craziness and the action of the hospitals as much as I did when I was younger. And so I decided to walk away from the 24/7 of the hospital, the 24/7 on call, the weekends, the holidays, all the things that you have to put in, and I decided to go work for the same company but at a clinic. And the clinic is only open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, so it's kind of like banker's hours, so to speak. And I really, really enjoy doing that.
Okay.
I'm very, very happy there. And I'm also able to focus there as well as a little bit more on my executive coaching, and it gives me more free time. My kids are a little older now. One of them's in college, another one's about to go to college, so I'm getting ready for some empty nest. My wife and I have a lot more time. I'm able to do more things I enjoy. I'm able to play basketball, rock climb, play frisbee golf with my son, with my friends.
Yeah.
And I see you out at the frisbee golf course all the time.
We're then out to play again.
And we have to play some more.
I'll text you.
So that's where I'm at in my career. That's the long answer to your short question.
When you were doing San Francisco, you were under Kaiser Permanente.
Yes, when I was in the San Francisco Bay Area, I was in a town. I lived in a town called Brentwood, but I worked in a town called Antioch. And I worked for Kaiser Permanente, and I was, as the service line director, I went all around the Bay Area, Oakland and Walnut Creek and San Francisco, Dublin and whatnot, to all the different facilities,
And then when you were doing the regional, where you were in charge of 4 states, what company was that?
I'll just say that was a jail medical company.
Oh,
there's 3 or 4 large jail medical companies in our country, and there's actually several more smaller ones, but it was one of the largest ones in the company.
Okay.
One of the largest companies in the world.
And what is that like?
So, first of all, Jail Medical is a contract vendor medical company that goes into the jails and has doctors and nurses and therapists and dentists and provides all the medical care you can possibly imagine for the incarcerated population, for the inmate population.